Hello there, just a quick video guide if you want to make your research life a little bit easier for you when you are using your GCSE Art and Design Research Guide. Now, if you use this talk to text or the narrator tool, it can really sort of like increase the speed of the research and make it a bit less of a painful process. And this PowerPoint goes through how to then do that. So I'm going to quickly go through that, show you how it works using an artist as a bit of an influence to help me make my writing. Now, if you hold down the Windows key and press H, it should bring up the narrator, or in this case, we might call it sort of like I just call it the talk to text. And it's listening then to what you want to then write down. I'm just going to cancel it for a second just while it's starting off there. And I'll then go through how to then do this in your own work. Now, whether you choose to print off your research and submit it into your art coursework like this, or you're going to incorporate the typed out research that you make as part of this talk to text video into your book like this with a creative border and then work that you've made, it's totally down to you. You need to decide. This is the third slide of the PowerPoint. This tells you how to use it and what to do. Now, this little bit here just says, whilst looking at 2 to 3 images of the artist, respond to the yellow highlighted questions area, and then the blue prompt questions and ideas underneath just give you a little bit more information. And as long as you click in the bit that says your response before activating the talk to text tool, you should be absolutely fine. But you will need a microphone to do this, and generally speakers. I tend to wear a headset, which makes my life easier, or you could use a voice recorder. It's totally up to you, which could be on your phone. Once you've answered all the questions and you've got your text, then it's down to you to decide how you want to then present it. But this will just hopefully cut out a little bit of the headache sometimes of writing the research. And if you are doing multiple researches for the artists, if you want to then use this PowerPoint, then I recommend doing it into 3 separate PowerPoints to stop it from getting confusing. So what do we do first? You must make sure you're looking at artist images while you research. So keep your PowerPoint open and get the artist in the PowerPoint so you're not just doing it from your imagination. For the purpose of this video, I'm going to use Bridget Riley. And if I go to my internet browser here, what I've got here is I've called up just a Google search, Bridget Riley. I've then looked at some images, and I've also called up the Wikipedia page just to give me a little bit of information, which I'll need first. So if I go back into my PowerPoint there, I still need some images. So what I would do is I would go on to the image search, and then I would just find either a print screen, or it could be that you copy and paste a few images into there. It's totally up to you. I'm just going to use a snipping tool just because it's one of my favorite tools ever. And I'm then just going to snip a little bit of the screen and then just keep it inside the PowerPoint as I am making my research. So I'm just going to paste it in there. So I've got something to look at all the time as I'm doing my typing and as I'm doing my writing. So if I keep that just literally just about there-ish, zoom in a little bit more so you can see what I'm looking at. So I'm going to look at these images while I'm writing my research. Now the first question, and the questions are always in yellow, the little bits of prompt are always in blue there. I need to make sure that I'm looking at images. Have I looked at the website? Have I looked at the wiki pages? Find out a bit of information about them. You know, give a bit of a description about their work. You know, is it, their work detailed, expressive, realistic? Can you generalize about the artist's work and talk about more than one piece? Let the reader know what you are doing. So when I'm doing that myself, there's also other useful things that you could do, such as going onto the image search. Sometimes the questions that people ask are pretty handy to look at as well, such as what is the style of artwork that Bridget Riley is famous for, which is op art. And in this case as well, what's the context of the work? And it tells you a little bit more about that to get you into that way of thinking. And I want to concentrate mainly on the fact that it's called the op art movement and that she uses optical illusions and quite simplistic shapes to create quite complex pieces of work. And it says here the two-dimensional surface of the paintings seem to move, vibrate and sparkle, which if you do look at them, they do have that effect, which can make you feel a little bit uneasy. And so for those of you that are a little bit visually sensitive, that might not be so good. So going back into this bit, I'm just going to click in here where it says your response. Then I'm going to click and hold the Windows key and press H. That brings the narrator up and it's just initializing. Now I'm just going to then turn it off because it's already started to type in what I'm saying there. I'm going to delete that out. I'm going to click back in. And I'm now ready to start talking about that artist's work. The key is not to give too much information about them specifically, stick to the work itself. So I'm going to try and do that now. Bridget Riley is a UK artist that is best known for their work associated with op art, which is relating to optical illusions. I find her work to be quite simplistic in many ways, but also quite complex and quite tricky in the way that most of the paintings and drawings that she makes are all hand drawn. No computer has taken part in generating the work that she makes, which is quite impressive. Full stop. So I'm just going to turn the little listening bit off there. Now, sometimes once you've done this little talk to text, you need to then make sure that you go back and read what's going on, because it's made a little key error there. It's called it pop art, which is not really relevant. So I'm going to just change that to op art and make sure that you just go back and just quickly check over if there's anything in there that needs changing. And then once I've read that, I'm then just about ready to then start and continue with the rest of it. And if I read this back here, where I've put the way that most of the paintings and drawings that she makes are all hand drawn, I should either put a comma in there or an and, just so it makes sense when I'm doing that. Don't just sort of like talk it all out and hope that it all will make sense. Always go back and check it. Now, I could go back and look for a little bit more information. The fact that she's 90 years old now, I could put that in there possibly, or maybe it would be more relevant if I'd put something in there that I found more interesting. You could have a look on Wikipedia. Is there anything relevant that you could talk about? Are you, how is this person sort of like relevant to what you're doing? So I would write about that. In the case of my students who are all looking at decoration in their forms, I'd talk a little bit about that, but I'm doing that pretending to be a student. So this is what I would probably say. Click my little microphone again. I would say that Bridget Riley's work isn't very realistic, as it's very decorative and pattern based. And this creates a connection to my work in class because I am looking at decorative arts in the work that I create. Just going to click the microphone off again, just while I'm thinking about what to say, and I'll just click a little full stop. And so as you're going, it's literally writing out the words that you are talking, and what will make life just that little bit easier for you. Okay, and here, just notice that it's made a bit of a mistake again. It's put patent based, and it should say pattern based. So again, just make sure you're checking over what you're doing, and don't get yourself into a bit of a state by forgetting to click your microphone on and off. Now, and then it put connection with an X, a bit odd. So I'm going to change that back to the normal spelling of connection with a C and a T instead. And I did want to just mention the fact that some of her work appears to be moving, as I've read earlier on. So I'm going to just say that. When I look at Bridget Riley's work, it does appear as if the work is moving or flowing depending on the type of pattern, which can make you feel a little bit unbalanced and can be unnerving if you were to see the work in real life. So I've then just done that. I could just then just quickly look at that and just to make sure that that's about correct. So I'm going to leave that about there. Then I'm going to move on to the next question. So if I go further down, this one is, how does the artist use line, tone, texture, and space? So each different one of those 4 elements, I've then sort of just given a little bit more help and support with. Now in this one here, where it says lines, are the lines straight, curvy, outline, scratchy, broken, jagged? Are the lines clear? Does your eye move the light across in any direction? If so, where and how? So if I'm going to write in my response here, I'm going to put line, put a little colon so I know roughly when I'm working. And it doesn't matter if your work and writing goes off the page. It's just to get that in there. You can always delete these parts out afterwards and then use that to form your research. I've got Bridget Riley's images there. I think I've got something to say about line, so I'll just start recording. Line is quite a clear visual element in most of Bridget Riley's work, even in some of the checkerboard patterns, as seen in my research images that I've selected above. But lines are always very clear and normally very solid, even if they are wavy or straight, full stop. So I've just put a little bit about the lines in there. It's just capitalized wavy for some strange reason, so I'm going to change that just back to there. And I'm just going to capitalize that. So always, like I say, go back and check. And it says mine is quite a clear visual element. What I should have said there is line is quite a clear visual element. There we go. So put my cursor back on there. And then can I say anything else about line in there? I've said about the fact that the lines are always very clear and normally very solid. I could talk about that lines often flow from one edge to the other. So I'm going to mention that. Lines from Bridget Riley's work often flow from one edge to the other to create one continuous line, or in this case, one continuous pattern. It's a mixture of wavy lines and straight lines, depending on the pattern that the artist is trying to depict, that make the pattern piece complete. Now, you might notice I started to slow down and was getting maybe a little bit lost for words. So sometimes it helps to just roughly plan out what you're going to say in your head before you say it. And I'm just going to just go back and read that again. I've already said the words wavy lines there. So I might actually sometimes go back and think, could I have said that a little bit better? You know, can I change any of that? And what I might do here is I might just get rid of it to create one continuous line and then just write or pattern. And I can always come back to these later as time then goes on. If I then go into the next one, which is tone, just looking at these little prompts here, then talk about the tone, the nature of light and dark in the image. And then you can also compare it to other artists that you spoke about as well, if you've looked at, depending on who you've looked at in your research. The use of tone in Bridget Riley's work is often very extreme in that very, very light and very, very dark colours and lines are used to make the different optical illusions and patterns that the artist chooses to make. Just going to stop it again, just while I'm thinking about what to say or what to write for the next part. I put very, very there and very, very again. So I might need to just capitalize that R there and change, instead of it's very, very, just put it as very. Very light and very dark colours and lines are used to make the different optical illusions patterns that the artist chooses. I could mention that she uses extreme tones in many cases and solid colours which are only one tone. There's not a lot of gradients that are created in a lot of the work that I've been looking at here. So if I click it again, there aren't many gradients within the shapes and lines that Bridget Riley uses, even in the coloured pieces, which are always solid, which makes me think that the tone is always extreme and singular. So that could be my statement there for tone. So as long as you then make sure that you keep clicking off, just double check what you're writing all the way through. And by the time that you've gone through all of this PowerPoint and answered all of those questions about the artist, you know, how do they use pattern, color, shape and form, you know, technique, meaning, opinion, the connection, can you compare and contrast those artists to anyone else? Have you got any other suggestions for how else you could make the work? Which is often a bit more of a tricky question to answer. And in the case of Bridget Riley, if I just cut those out and just put them on here. Now, in the most cases in class, we've been using fine liner, biros, Sharpies to make optical illusion patterns. But maybe you could think of something else you could use. Maybe you could suggest that possibly painting like the artist might be a way of generating the work, but you have to have a very fine hand and a lot of sort of like care and control to get that. So it all depends on what you could suggest. Could you make the patterns in a different way? You know, you could suggest that you could use a computer. So if I was going to write that into my response here, if I press my record, I'll just make sure that I click on. If I was making work like Bridget Riley, different to using fine liner and biro and Sharpies, as I have been doing in class, I may choose to use paint, which might be quite tricky, but I might try to use computer software such as Photoshop, or even more simplistic software such as PowerPoint to repeat, tessellate, and change patterns to generate a different type of optical illusion artwork in a different way. Apologies for my phone going off there. I'm not quite sure what was going on. And like the different parts that you then put in there and different parts of the information that you write up, you can add to as you go through. Sometimes picking and choosing between different questions is a good way to go through your research because you can always come back and add to it later on. This last couple of slides here, the 3 slides at the end, this is where you might just pick on one image specifically. So if I was doing that from this one, say if I really like the idea of analysing this image here, I could just pick on that image, paste it into here, and then talk about that image more sort of in depth, just to show that you're not just looking at a generalised way of looking at that artist. So I could do that on this one. And these last 2 slides, which are the blockbuster questions, they are just getting you to think about the work in a different way. Sometimes, you know, who else and what other people think of this artist? You know, what question would you ask the artist if you had the chance? And if it was a real image, you know, and time could pass, what would happen to that image? In the case of Bridget Riley's work, it might be that the patterns pulsate and move, which they appear to do when they are still, and you could maybe suggest that. You know, if it was the case where, you know, could the artist's work link to any other subjects you study? In the case of Bridget Riley, it could be maths. due to the mathematical nature and preciseness of the patterns that she'd make. Maybe it could be used in DT, in the surfaces that you create on objects that you're planning or designing at the moment. It could be something where, describe the artist's work in 10 words or less. That could be something where you could summarize the artist's work and just show a little bit more of an unusual way of responding to their work. So each one of the different slides that are in this PowerPoint are all just designed to get you to give a level of response that will help you give a good quality response to your research, all of which could be combined and then used with in-class work to then show that you've got a good written understanding as well as a good practical understanding of the artwork that you create in class and at home. So use this narrator, but just double check. Like I say, don't worry if the stuff goes off the page, like my text has started going down there. It's all about trying to make your life easier. So hopefully this has helped you a little bit. And if you've got any questions, please message me through the channel. Thank you for that. Goodbye.